Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm going to start talking about layers. This is going to be the main focus of this video. Layers are super, super cool, very, very useful. However, they can be very confusing the first time you use them, and it does take a little bit of time to get used to. So once you understand what the concept is, it's fantastic, but easily you could get very frustrated if you don't understand how layers work, whether we're talking layers in Autodesk, Sketchbook Autodesk, or if you start using Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, anything like that that's an Adobe program or something similar to an Adobe program. I've spent a lot of the weekend creating things for graduation in Adobe programs. I've had a lot of fun doing it, but I also know the concept of layers, and they're great, but can get confusing. So I have two of my daughter's projects here in baggies to help you try to understand the concept of layers. So think about each thing that I add to its own layer is like its own little plastic sheet. Okay, so I'm using baggies because I don't have any acetate. But anyways, so think of it as like, okay, I added this image as like a background color, right? So if I create a new layer, okay, then I can add another image that will sit on top. Okay, so they look very poorly in this case. They look like they're together. Okay, but I can easily not view this one and only see this one, or I could not view the back one and only see this one. If I draw on this top layer, so I'm going to just take a Sharpie, right? Maybe I want to do like a cool outline. Okay, right? It'll only show up on this layer and I can only manipulate that layer, but it does not affect the layer underneath. So it's as if you have, like you could have 30 layers and it's like you have 30 separate little sheets. When they're flattened together, they look like they're all one project, but when you separate them, they're perfectly safe on their own. So it's really important that if I want to manipulate this layer, that I click on that layer to manipulate that so I don't accidentally draw on this one and then I can't fix it or I end up erasing or messing up my other layer. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm going to find a Photoshop file of something that I've been working on for graduation here. So I have, you know, my desktop here. Okay. So I'm going to go to my parade folder here. So I have all these different things going on. So for instance, I have this visitor map for the parade, right? So I've been creating all these little files in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in Sketchbook Autodesk, but just so you can kind of see something I've already been working on versus just like a bunch of chicken scratch. Okay, Photoshop sometimes is a little bit slow to load, so I apologize for that. Okay, so like this looks like one solid image, right? It looks like I've added all these little pieces, but if you look in this bottom right-hand corner, I have all of these different layers, right? So for instance, I could go to something that's a little bit more obvious. Okay, we'll go the fire truck, right? So if I go to the fire truck, I can move just the fire truck, okay? But if I've locked all the other layers, so say I've locked this student map, right? So I can hit this lock, right? It's not going to move here. It'll only move the layer that I actually want to work on that's highlighted, okay? So it just makes it so you can have lots of little pieces and you can manipulate that one little piece without messing up your other things. So think of the fire truck as this layer, and like the basic map structure that I drew in Illustrator would be like my background. So I'm just messing around with the fire truck. Okay, so like I could erase the fire truck, I could do all sorts of things. That's kind of what the concept is. So I'm just working with one thing, but protecting the other things, even though I can't necessarily see that they're separate. Okay, so I'm gonna get out of that so I don't have to save that. So now I'm gonna show you what this looks like in Autodesk. All right, so I just have a blank sheet. So the layers options are going to be over here. You also have your color option in this particular bar too. So in the last video, I was just doing everything in gray because I didn't change anything with the colors. So for right now, I'm just gonna focus on layers. So you know what layer you're working on if there is a blue box around it. So if I wanted to add, say, just a background color, right? I can go to, oops, this little guy up here. Sorry, I'm not able to access it without touching something else. It's the paint bucket tool, and I can add a color, right? Sorry, I get confused which piece I'm looking at. So I could take the paint bucket tool and I could just fill in that whole background. Okay, so that would be my background. So then I can go up to this little plus sign right here and I can create another layer. So I have my basic blue solid background. So then to create my next layer, say I want to add an image. Okay, so I would go to this little icon that's got like the little mountains up here with the plus sign, that's the picture. And then I can go to my camera roll and say I want to add, okay, a cardinal head somewhere in here. There we go. So say I want to add the cardinal head. All right, so I got that. And while it's here, I can move it around. So there's all these little icons up here for things like flipping, rotating, resizing, so on and so forth, right? So I'm just gonna hit done. Now with my fingers, I can zoom in and out just like you would any other app. Okay, if I don't like that image, I can do one of two things. I can either go over to this, click on it, that's got the blue box, and I could delete it. Or I can do the undo button that is up here or the redo button. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of show you how this works. So by having this background on here, let's delete this layer that's just got nothing on it, okay? If I go to the eraser tool, okay, so if I wasn't paying attention and I just start erasing, I go, oh, no, I want to erase the white, right? I'm trying to erase this white area. I go, oh, I see the little blue box. I'm on the wrong layer. So I'm gonna hit undo. Cool thing about digital work is there's the undo button, right? Okay, so then I would make sure I click on my cardinal head so I get to the right layer. And then I can start erasing all this white stuff and go, oh good, now I can see my blue background. Okay, and I'll just take my time as I get closer to that edge. All right, so how does this pertain to your landscape project? So landscape, layer options actually are exactly how you would paint a landscape with acrylic. So your bottom layer would be your background, your next layer would be your middle ground, and maybe your top layer would be details in your foreground. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but that just kind of shows you some basics if you didn't use digital artwork anyways for your street art project on things like layers. All right, so I'm not gonna sit and erase everything. In Photoshop, there's way more cool tools to make this a heck of a lot faster, but basic concept, you're just erasing that outline. So then if I wanted to move it around again or resize it, I would just go to the little arrows. Sorry, these little arrow guys right here. Right, and then I can hit, I can pinch, I can resize it, I can make it bigger, I can twist it, I can mirror it, whatever, okay? So done. Another thing that you can do, if I click on the layer itself, so just clicked on that, I can copy this layer, right? So I could copy this and then go back up to this. Maybe I want to flip it. Oops, Sorry, spoke too soon. I forgot to copy and paste. Okay, don't forget to paste stuff. Now I ended up pasting to the same layer. So that ends up making it a little bit confusing. Okay, so maybe I would undo that. So I'd want to do another layer. And I can hit paste. And then that way I can manipulate just this one, but I can't do anything with this down here. So it just moves and affects this. So if you notice, if I erase over here, it doesn't do anything. So I'm moving my finger to the right, nothing's happening. Okay, so that's that. Okay. Other things that I can do is I can do opacity. So just like with my brushes. So this is where I love using it the most because like maybe you want something kind of faint in the background. All right, so I can adjust the opacity of that layer. Okay. You can duplicate the layer. So just making the same thing clear, merge. Merge would mean that I'm going to attach these together. So if I want this layer here and this layer here to become one layer, because there's occasionally where you're like, I need those to be stuck together. And sometimes with these apps, because they're free, you're only limited to so many types of layers that you can have. So it's not like Photoshop where you could have like 100. You might need only 3. So you might need to merge them together. So if I hit merge, it pushes those two together. So now they are one image. And it's really apparent when I go to the transform tool because now they're stuck together. So it's kind of like gluing them together when you merge them together. All right, so that's kind of basics with the layer system. There's things like blending, color label too. So like in Photoshop, I would always color label things. So it just makes a little dot. And then like if you want to lock stuff, you just click that little lock. So lock means I can't do anything to it, right? So transparency is locked. So if I try to go to manipulate it, okay, it kind of limits my options of what I can do to that layer, which is good in some ways because then you don't accidentally mess stuff up. So if you're like, okay, I know I'll probably accidentally grab that, just hit the lock button and it'll be okay. So I might do that like with my background. All right, so that's layers in a nutshell and how it works. Obviously you can paint, you can draw within each layer, but it's just easier to show you with photos because it's a little bit faster and a little bit clearer explanation. All right, so hope that helps. Bye guys.